You're listening to Milwaukee Mafia, your podcast dose of Wisconsin Mafia and true crime history.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Milwaukee Mafia podcast. I'm Eric.
I'm Gavin.
And we are back again. Second Mafia in a day, which is weirdly strange. That doesn't happen very often.
Doesn't happen very often, but you said that was what we were falling behind on, so I thought, well, just do two of them.
Yeah, and I just edited this morning of Fox City's Murder and Mayhem, and we're way ahead on Fox Verde. I think the next episode that comes out is going to be in May.
Nice. Nice.
So what are we talking about?
And for those listening, we're recording this in March.
Yeah. I guess everybody else might be like, well, that doesn't...
That's not that far ahead. Well,
because
you're hearing this a month later, but yeah. Yeah, so today we're going to talk about this is an episode I could do in 5 minutes, but because that's not how this podcast works, we're going to drag it out. We're going to talk about the Wiretap lawsuits.
Okay.
To refresh people, I think everybody who's a regular listener by now should know this because it's come up many times. The FBI put bugs, hidden microphones, in Frank Balistrieri's office, in his attorney Dominic Frenzy's office, and also in an apartment next door to the apartment of his bookkeeper.
And was the one in the apartment, was that the quote office that we did an episode about before? I feel like I
don't think so.
Okay. This is
the bookkeeper one. It was not a very good one. They didn't really pick up anything on it. My understanding is what they had kind of done was they had set it up across the hall and they like monitored through like a spy hole who was coming and going. It wasn't recording things on the level that these other two were.
Okay.
That's my understanding of how that one went. But anyway, so people at this point should know it's come up a few times. Dominic Frenzy loves bringing it up. He loves mentioning that, hey, I was being bugged by the FBI, which first of all is illegal, but second of all, I'm an attorney, so it's double illegal. Because you cannot listen in on an attorney talking to attorney's clients. That's one of the biggest no-nos you can do.
If it wasn't the government doing it, it would not have been a pretty outcome for whoever did do it, basically, right?
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
If a private person broke in, installed a microphone to recording people, they'd be in prison.
Right.
No doubt.
And in Dominic Frenzy's office, nonetheless,
right.
Too. So
yeah, they would definitely be in some trouble. But when the FBI does it, even though it's still illegal, you don't get in trouble for that.
And the listener should already know, but we might as well just set it up. What's the government's solution to this problem?
The government's solution to it is they pass a bill in 1968 making it legal for the FBI to plant bugs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, they in 1968 they passed what's called the Omnibus Crime Control Act. Has a number of things in it, but yeah, kind of the big one is the ability to plant microphones, what are called Title IIIs, and they put them in people's offices or wherever. A judge has to sign off on them. They can't just put them wherever they want, but you get a friendly judge and you can pretty much do what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, October 1969, Dominic Frenzy files a $1 million lawsuit against the federal government, alleging that FBI agents conspired with the phone company to wiretap his downtown office. He sued agents Alexander Legrand, Clark Lavrine, John Holtzman, Joseph O'Connell, and a handful of telephone employees as well.
Wow, even telephone employees got sued.
Well, because it was running through a phone line.
Right.
So the phone company was aware that it was there.
Yeah, but I can see suing the telephone company, but the telephone company's employees even.
Yeah. Yes. The very next day, Frank Balistrieri files a lawsuit. Now, Frenzy asked for $1 million. Frank requests $1,750,000 for the microphone planted against him, and his bookkeeper, Jenny Aliotto, filed another $1 million lawsuit as well. So, all three people filing essentially the same lawsuit. They're targeting the same people here. Agent Clark Levine files a motion immediately after having himself removed from the lawsuit. He claimed he wasn't involved in the incident, had no knowledge of it, and in fact, he had resigned from the FBI in July of 1962 before the bug was ever placed, and was retired living on a farm in Marquette County. So the judge agreed. Yeah, you don't have to be sued here. Agents John Holtzman and Alexander Legrand also asked to be removed. They said that their actions were as federal employees at the request of their superiors, and therefore they were not responsible for what they did. Which is, that's the appropriate thing for them to say. Whether it's right or not, that's another matter. But that is the appropriate defense.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you're. This is the thing. This is always like the difficulty, right? If you work for, whether it's a private company or the government, in this case the government, but whatever. When you work somewhere and your superior tells you to do something, and you know that thing they tell you to do is probably not okay, you generally still do it. And and that's the thing, like, are you responsible for the thing that you did when you were directed to do it? And I can add a little bit to that because, like, so when I was in the military, this is how they told you, is that if somebody told you to do something and you knew it wasn't right, you did it anyways and you reported it later. Mm-hmm. Because they said you are doing something wrong if you don't do what your superior tells you to do. Right.
So now, whether that's a military thing or if that's all of the government, I would say that's probably all of the government. And I kind of feel like these people, are they responsible?
Yeah. Like, I think this very much falls under the same kind of thing where the correct thing to do is say, I'm a law enforcement agent. This is not legal. I should not do this. But I don't think that's typically how it works.
Right. That they say, well, that's what you should have done. But it's like, it's a lot easier to say you should do that than it is to actually do it.
Right.
And at the same time, you think about like the phone company employees. They have the government coming to them, telling them to do this. I mean, again.
No, and I don't blame the phone company at all. I actually completely have no problem with the phone company in this matter. Because if the FBI comes to them and the FBI says we're authorized to tap into the phone line, I'm not surprised at all the phone company's like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, that's
exactly.
So I don't blame them at all. Yeah, this is like the tricky, and I don't want to go down this path. This is not what this podcast is for. But like, of course, what the classic counterexample is.
What?
This is like, you can always turn any argument into a Hitler argument, right? Right? And so we have these things after World War II called the Nuremberg trials.
Okay.
Where they had, in these trials, like, a lot of it's just for show, because these guys were treated really, really well. But they went on trial for the things that they did, and their defense was consistently, I did what I was told to do. Mm-hmm. And then the response was always like, that doesn't make it right, Mm-hmm. And so it's like, that's, I hate that. I'm not comparing the FBI to the Nazis. Be very clear. I'm not doing that. But that's the thing. Like, where is that line?
And that's what's so hard about all of this crap. Is that there is a line, and where that line should be is different for everybody, blah, blah, blah. So, we could debate this all day. And...
No, like I said, it's not really, that's not the point of this podcast. Yeah. But that's the thing, like, that is the correct defense, is saying that's what I was directed to do. But how far can you carry that defense? The Justice Department comes in to represent the agents and the former agents of the FBI. So they don't have to, even though they were sued as individuals, they don't have to cover their own attorneys or anything like that. The Justice Department comes in. The Justice Department has some very good attorneys, so that's good. They also successfully got the wiretap lawsuits moved from state court to federal court. They were sued in state court, but they moved it to federal court because they're like, well, if you're suing the federal government, let's move it to federal court. The judges agreed on that, and they did that, which is probably to the advantage of the federal government to have it in federal court. But various motions were filed, and again, the agents are arguing that what they did was done under the general authorization of the Attorney General. In this case, the U.S. Attorney General, not the state Attorney General. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if the courts, and the Balestriers knew this, but I can tell you from the internal memos that are flying around during this time, the Attorney General did not sign off on this.
Really? Okay.
Did not. J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI, approved it. He never got clearance from the Attorney General. So they're going to be really vague about how they say this. And they're going to say, we got the general authorization of the Attorney General, which is like their wiggle word way of saying, like, the Attorney General directed us to do whatever we could to stop organized crime. The Attorney General did not specifically say wiretap them. Yeah. So,
and we never even asked him if we should do that.
Right.
He just said, just do what you got to do, and then they.
So they're saying, this came all the way from the top, from the Attorney General, which is not strictly speaking true, but they phrase it in a vague way to make it sound like it did. Depositions are done. Balestrieri, Frinzi, Aliotto are all do their depositions. The government attorney requested the bureau files on them and newspaper articles on each of them to prepare the deposition. And this is where things start getting, to me, weird. The government attorney during these depositions is clearly trying to get more out of them than the specifics of this case. Frank gives his deposition. His son, Joe, is acting as an attorney. He didn't bring with him all the records that were asked of him to be brought. And through advice of his attorney, he declined to answer questions about previous occupations he had, his affiliation with taverns, his various bank accounts, his relationship with Felix Eldoricio, his connections to the Mafia, any business dealings he had in Chicago, and various other things. Dominic Frinzi had his deposition, and during this, he acknowledged that he knew John Aliotto, he knew Frank Balestrieri, he knew Frank Logelbo, three guys who were known mob guys. He said that he was a classmate of Frank Balestrieri's wife, so he'd known them forever. He said that he didn't actually have access to many of the records that they requested of him because at the current time he was going through a divorce. His wife kicked him out of the house, and he couldn't get to the files that were in his basement because his wife wouldn't let him in.
Oh, the cute problem side.
Yeah. Jenny Aliotto had a deposition the same day. She was represented by Joseph Balestrieri. He would not let her answer questions about tax records, connections to various taverns, the company Midwest Scrap Metal, or payments that she had received from the Badger State Boxing Club. During questioning, she denied that she was directed by anybody to file a lawsuit, but she did acknowledge that she didn't really give any information to her attorney when it was filed, and didn't really choose the amount that she was suing for. So she basically is saying, like, I wasn't told to file this lawsuit, but I didn't really have any involvement in filing this lawsuit. Joseph Balestrieri asked that the lawsuit be done in secret, which generally is not done. But his reasoning for this is, at the time, Frank is still going through his long, drawn-out tax case, for many, many years. And Joseph Balestrieri argues that it might be prejudicial to have this in the public record while that other case is going on. I don't know. I mean, the other side, the government had no objections to that. They said, like, there's really no connection between these two, but like, we don't have a problem with that. The government files requests for more subpoenas and depositions. And Joseph Balestrieri says, I don't think that some of these are relevant, but, I'll let the courts decide that. The government attorney, Neil Peterson, sought records from 26 individuals. The people that he was looking for were people connected to Balestrieri's Continental Music sales, the business that they had bugged. The judge at the time, Myron Gordon, said that he wasn't really sure that the federal government had the authority to make these subpoenas, but he'd hold a hearing on it and decide, and give them 3 weeks to respond, both sides to respond to the merits of this. Those subpoenaed were the landlord of the property, the Continental Music property,
okay,
August Chiavarati of a business called Factory Closeout, Joseph Balestrieri Sr., Frank's dad, Rose Palmisano, Frank's sister, Carl Dentise of Dentise Amusement, Peter Pachuro of Delicious Distributors, it was like a vending company, Joseph Maniaci, Joseph Caminiti, the head of the local Teamsters Union, Santo Marino of the Marino's Corner Bar, Walter Broca, Paul Bogosian, who ran an Oriental rug company, Rudolph Porchetta of the Brass Rail, Jimmy Gennaro. Just on and on and on, like all these people, 26 people.
Well, and this is for some way to defend their wiretapping lawsuit?
Yes.
Like, were all these people on the wiretap and that's why they needed? Was that the idea behind this, or?
No idea.
No idea, huh?
No idea.
I mean, are they just trying to bury them in paperwork, or I don't know.
Yeah. So the judge says both sides need to file their explanations of why the judge should or should not grant these subpoenas for depositions. The federal government, in response to that, filed a 165-page report, which is a little excessive.
Who do you think wrote that report?
I don't know. They claimed that they need at least 16 of these depositions to prove that Balestrieri was endeavoring to conceal his interest in jukeboxes. They said that Judge Gordon had no power or discretion to stop depositions, which were needed to point out that Balestrieri's previous filing concerning his role in Continental Music sales was false. So let me say this here: the judge is going to shoot this down. Okay. The judge is going to shoot this down. I am not a judge. I am not an attorney. But this to me reads like the government has now been sued. The federal government has now been sued. And civil court works very different than criminal court.
Okay.
Criminal court has very tight rules about what can be entered into evidence or not. It's very, very, very narrow. Civil court has a much wider what's called discovery phase, where a large amount of material can be called in, depositions can be done, and the depositions, generally go much wider than the scope of the lawsuit. It's not unheard of for civil suits to kind of spread out beyond the actual lawsuit. That being said, it's very obvious to me that what the FBI is doing here is using this as an excuse to create a record of people that it's looking into. Because it does not matter at all what any of these people say in their depositions. It doesn't matter if they take a deposition and they say, Frank Balestrieri is murdering people. He's doing the most awful, terrible things. It doesn't matter. Like, they can say that. I mean, that's not good if they said that, because then people will get in trouble for other things. But as far as the lawsuit's concerned, none of that would make it legal to have the wiretap.
So do you think that they're playing this card to delay the lawsuit, or do you think it's just because they're kind of using it as a fact-finding exercise?
I think it's partially to delay, but it's primarily a fact-finding exercise. I think that's exactly what they're doing here. Is they're like, the more people we can get on the record, the more we can then come back later and do something.
Use their testimony for other things.
Because we can't use anything we got on the wiretap. Like that we cannot legally use any of that. But once we get them on a deposition, that's a sworn statement. We now can use that as evidence for anything going forward. So it's basically like, this comes to me as like, they're going to get people to create a legal record confirming the things that they heard on the bug that they can't use. Absolutely brilliant legal strategy from the FBI, but
slightly shady.
But yeah, like I don't fault them for trying. I think it's a brilliant move, but if I'm the judge, I'm going to shut this down real fast, because I'm going to be like, none of this in any way, no matter if you could get these guys to all say that something terrible was happening, that doesn't make it okay for you then to go in and put in a bug. That none of that makes that okay. So to me, like, I would shut this down real fast.
And the judge probably is that much more annoyed, because, I mean, what they're attempting to do is just going to waste the time of the court, because they're going to have 36 people coming in do a testimony.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the weeks that would probably take to accomplish. So,
yeah. So, to the judge's credit, Judge Myron Gordon here, yeah, he basically shuts this down. The government files their 165-page report, which is excessive, I think, and to try to like argue why this is necessary. But Judge Gordon's not having it, and good for him, because, you know, it doesn't make it right. There's when something is not okay, you can't make it okay. Like, you just can't. So.
This case right here is pretty open and shut.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the middle of this is not really related, but I'm throwing it in here because in the middle of this, Dominic Frenzy does get his divorce finalized. His wife divorces him because apparently he was argumentative and would abandon her periodically, and she didn't know where he went. His income was assessed at $30,000 a year, meaning that he would be paying $260 a month for child support and $408 a month on a mortgage with his shared house, which he would not have to pay once the house was sold. Adjusted for inflation, his $30,000 a year was $242,000 a year in today's money. So I don't know if that's high or low. It's definitely higher than the average attorney, but I would say that he's one of the top attorneys in the state. So maybe that's a little low. I don't know. You know, $250,000 a year. I'm sure that Hoopy and Abraham are doing better than that. I don't know.
I have no idea. So
yeah, I don't know. But I mean, most attorneys are probably not making under like $100,000. So.
Oh yeah.
I say that, and then I'm going to get a nasty email from like
1,200
from like the public defender, and they're going to be like, "I don't get paid crap." Okay, yeah, sorry. Yes, that's true. There's definitely a range. Some make much less, but it goes to trial. A couple of the people they wanted to have depositions from do appear at the trial, but it's relatively like well contained because it's not relevant. So pretty much the government wants to call somebody, Joseph Balestrieri objects to them being called, and the judge is primarily going to shut them down.
Okay.
So almost nobody from the list actually shows up. One guy gets subpoenaed. He shows up, and Joseph Balestrieri asks him, "Do you happen to know another person who has your same name?" And the guy says, "Well, I do get bills for a guy with another name every once in a while." He goes, "Actually, my cousin has the same name, and he lives on North Jackson Street." At that point, the judge dismissed it and said, "If you go across the hall, you'll get a witness fee. It'll be written out to your cousin, but you can cash it." So yeah, the one guy they called, they got the wrong guy. This drags on for some time. The lawsuit was originally filed in 1969. It drags on all through 1970. It starts dragging on through 1971. In the middle of 1971, Frank Balestrieri goes to prison, not because of this, but so that kind of drags it on a little bit. While he's in prison, Dominic Frinzi settles his lawsuit. He had sued for $1 million. He ends up getting $20,000.
Wow.
So, much less. January 1972, the Justice Department Attorney Neil Peterson asked the judge to dismiss the lawsuits of Frank Balestrieri and Jenny Aliotto. He goes, the government's admitting that we bugged the places, but at this point, I think the statute of limitations has run out. I don't think we can carry this case on any further. He also said there's a fundamental problem with the lawsuit. Like, the people who have sued us, Frank Balestrieri and his bookkeeper, have claimed that what we did damaged their reputation. And the government attorney says, I cannot imagine a single person that this would have damaged their reputation to. Basically saying, like, there's nothing that we made public about Frank Balestrieri that would lower anybody's opinion of him. Which, it sounds kind of mean, but that is a valid argument.
It is a valid argument, but you still friggin' wiretapped him.
Right.
I mean, it's like what you've been saying the whole episode. It still doesn't make it okay.
No, no, none of it makes it okay. But I'm giving the government credit for really trying here, and that is a thing. Like, he didn't sue them for like libel or slander. That's not even the reason he sued them. But that is a valid defense. Like, if you call somebody an awful name and you get sued for it, but they already have a terrible reputation, that lawsuit is generally going to get tossed, because you calling them a nasty name doesn't hurt the public's perception of that person. So that is a valid defense, but it is not really the heart of the issue here. Mm-hmm. They try to get it dismissed again, saying that paperwork was not filed by a certain deadline. The judge did not agree to that. They kind of let it slide a little bit. They're like, dude is in prison. Got to give him a couple days grace on his paperwork filing. Ultimately, so again, filed in 1969, finally, in October of 1972, Balestrieri goes into prison. He comes out of prison, and 3 years after the original lawsuit, he settles his lawsuit. He had sued for $1.7 million, and he ends up getting $6,000. So,
and did Jenny Aliotto get?
I'm sure she did. I'm not sure what her settlement was.
She probably just settled it outside of court too.
Yeah, I'm sure she got something. But
no, this again plays back to, like we were talking about with Frank's tax trial, about how did the government win because they dried him up so much of money. I bet you they did a pretty good job in this scenario.
I think they did. I would say the government won because prior to the lawsuit, I feel like Balestrieri had the upper hand here because Dominic Frinzi is repeatedly going out. He's campaigning for various government positions, political positions, and he's saying the FBI did this. They're doing horrible things. They're shaming, all this stuff. And I think during that part of it, people are going to side with Dominic Frinzi and at least to some extent Frank Balestrieri. Mm-hmm. They're going to be like, yeah, that isn't right.
Right.
But once they actually initiate the lawsuit, I feel like the government then starts becoming the winner on that. Because there's nothing that comes out of this where Balestrieri comes out ahead.
No.
Because he's not trying to publicly shame the government at this point. He's actually trying to do this on the down low. The government is trying to get information out of him and other people. I don't think they get very much, but, they have more to gain here than he does. And he ultimately has to pay, or he ultimately gets paid $6,000. I don't know what it costs him in legal fees. I'm guessing not a whole lot since his son acted as his attorney.
Yeah, I suppose.
But regardless, for all that effort, $6,000 is piddly because it's the federal government. The federal government, if you sue the federal government and the federal government pays you, that doesn't hurt anybody. That's just the public's money,
And I also think it's really funny because in this scenario, so the government does something that is by their own laws blatantly illegal at this point in time.
Yes.
And so in my eyes, the federal government breaks their own laws. There should be a steep penalty for that.
There should be.
But
who's going to enforce it?
Exactly. And they get to they have to pay $26,000 for this.
Correct. Correct.
Now, whether the million 1.75 million was valid at all, I don't know.
That might be a little steep.
That was probably steep. But at the same time, at least Dominic Frinzi should have gotten significantly more money than...
Right.
In all honesty, any client of Dominic Frinzi should have been part of that lawsuit and gotten something for it.
Fair point.
So...
But, yeah, it's really weird because the FBI breaks the law. There's nothing that you can really do about that. Mm-hmm. The FBI agents aren't going to jail. It's not going to happen. The FBI director isn't going to get in trouble. I mean,
he might have to step down.
He might have to step down. Yeah. Worst case scenario is the Senate calls a hearing, they blast him and push him into resigning. That might be the worst, which they don't. Nobody gives a crap what Hoover does, but it doesn't happen. And it's what do you do? And then ultimately they pay out, but it's the agents didn't pay any of that money. The FBI doesn't lose some of their budget because of that. Yeah, nobody actually took any damages for this.
Our national debt just went up $26,000.
Right.
And that's it.
Right. This all just comes out of the federal budget. Nobody personally who got sued had any negative thing happen to them. So it's an interesting thing. I don't know what the solution to that is. I'm not going to even try to propose that. There is not a
solution to that. Yeah. It's just an interesting, the way when you look at it, you're that's kind of messed up, but how do you fix it? Who knows? So, but anyways, with that, you got anything else for this episode?
I do not have anything else for this episode. I wasn't even sure if I was going to cover the wiretap thing on the podcast, but because like I said, I could sum it up in 5 minutes. The whole idea is dumb. I don't think suing them was dumb. I mean, I think that
needed to be done.
But the way it played out, ultimately there's not a whole lot going on there.
I think it gives a good picture of just how the court system, some of the wackiness that goes on in the court system with trying to, we can leverage this to extract information and stuff like that. So, which is not at all what our court system is supposed to be about.
No, I don't think so. But it's true though. Like, I don't know about you, Eric, but like other people who watch like Dateline or like the Law and Crime Network or whatever these things are now, like they'll be familiar with the idea that like people take depositions and those depositions go all over the place. Mm-hmm. Like they're not very confined to what the actual lawsuits are about. So yeah, they're an opportunity. I don't know that they were designed that way, but they're an opportunity to get people on the record for all kinds of nonsense.
Yeah, and that's the thing that bothers me, is just because so much they have systems in place, and for the most part the systems are designed to work in the way they should, but then what happens is over time we manipulate them and we find loopholes to make these things that serve a good purpose a terrible thing, because they're being abused for other things at the same time. But that's our legal system, so
that's that.
And that's why I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah.
So
all
right.
So we'll have some episodes coming up. I know what like the next 3 episodes are.
So what are we talking about on the next one?
The next one I think next is Howard Meester. And Howard Meester is the head of a bank, and we're going to kind of talk about he was accused of some shady things, but also this is like the bank that both the Teamsters use and the Balistri's use for getting loans. So we're going to talk about some banking stuff. Coming up soon, we're going to talk about the Shorecrest Hotel, which is the hotel that the Balistri family is largely connected with. Joe Balistri, the son, purchases this hotel very soon in our timeline. And as recently as last year, as recently as 2024, John, his brother, still lived there. Mm-hmm. So this is a place that the family had for a good 50 years. So we'll talk about
how he actually lived there, huh?
He lived there, yeah.
I think in an episode you had talked about he had an office there, but he actually lived there too.
He lived there too. He has an office on the ground floor, and he lived in there as well. Yeah, so we'll talk about how Joe Balistri got the Shorecrest Hotel, which is going to be, a main part of everything going forward, because the restaurant in the hotel is where Frank starts holding all his meetings, and so it's a major part of the story moving forward.
Very cool. All right. Well, with that, we will wrap this episode up, and we want to thank everybody for their continued support of this podcast. We will be back next week with a mayhem, not a mayhem, but a Patreon.
Yeah.
And in 2 weeks with a regular Mafia episode. Gavin.
Yeah, we're just stumbling today. I don't know. Both of us.
Where can people reach out to you?
They can email MilwaukeeMafia@gmail.com. It's a fine Gmail address that people can use. They should go to MilwaukeeMafia.com. Check that out. I post the show notes on there. And when I say show notes, like they're not notes. Like, these are some dense paragraphs. It's everything you hear me say, plus some stuff I skim over. So if you want anything like in hard copy from this, it's there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And some of them, I think we've done some episodes where Gavin has walked in here with like 13 pages and he's like, don't worry, I'm just skimming most of it.
Yeah.
This, so
everything that we talk about ends up on there. So there is that. If somebody wanted to go through and read 100, at this point, I don't know how many hundreds of pages are probably on there, but you could read some pretty detailed stuff if you really wanted to.
All right. So with that, we'll see everybody on the next episode, and thanks for tuning in.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Milwaukee Mafia podcast. Join us next time for another look back at Wisconsin Mafia and true crime history.